In 1999, Roger and I had been to visit my parents in Arkansas, and we were on our way home, and our youngest son at the time, Dalton, was almost 2 years old.
Dalton wasn't feeling well, about 2 years old, a little bit of grumpy, so we got in our vehicle as an SUV and started home, and Joe asked if she could just hold Dalton.
So I sweet talked my husband into letting me hold the baby till we made it to the highway.
I agreed to it. We got to the end of the dirt road and he had fallen asleep, and we really didn't want to wake him up because he was sick and not feeling well, and we knew that he would be pretty upset. So we decided we would just be careful and drive slow on the way home. 17 highway is just a 2-lane roadway. There's no shoulder. The highway is nothing but hills and curves. And we got almost to West Plains, and we topped a hill whenever we noticed that there was a line of cars coming toward us in their lane of traffic, but yet there was another car coming at us in our lane.
There was a row of cars coming towards us, and then there was a car that was on our side of the road coming directly toward us. He was passing illegally on a double lane. And when he saw us, he darted back right behind the first car, and when he did, he clipped the bumper of the back car, or of the first car, and they both started spinning out of control.
And as they went into a spin, they were spinning across both lanes of traffic, which is the only place we had to go. With no shoulder, I mean, there was just nowhere for us to go. So we put on the brakes, put my arm in front of her, and if we had tried to pull off the side of the roadway, we would have rolled our vehicle, being an SUV, and as steep as the embankment was. So as soon as we saw this,
we were bracing for impact, and all I did was say Jesus. I just grabbed my son, and my husband put his arms out in front of us because we did not have our seatbelts on, and we were just bracing for impact. And as soon as I said Jesus, the cars that were spinning were behind us, and there was no feasible way that they could have got from in front of us to behind us without going through us. And all I could say was Jesus. And instantly the cars were behind us.
And we had both kind of embraced and getting ready for an impact that never occurred.
And so we pulled over in a driveway that was right there, and my husband got on the phone with the police and ambulance.
Took off running back towards all the other vehicles that had wrecked there, helping some of the people till they got there. And then whenever they arrived, EMS treated the persons that were hurt, and highway patrolmen arrived at that time.
I sat in the vehicle for a couple minutes, and then I got out with the baby, and we walked over there and waited for the police and the ambulance to come and checked on the lady that was in the first car, and it had ejected her out her side window of the car. And so she was laying on the side of the road, but she was alert. She was badly bruised from the airbag going off, but it hadn't, I mean, other than that, she was not injured, didn't appear to be injured. And so we waited for the ambulance to get there, and they loaded her up, and she kept asking what happened to her shoes because she was barefoot. And so I asked her at first if she had taken her shoes off in her car, and she said no, they were on my feet. And we searched the ditch areas on both sides of the highway and even in the field, and we searched her car, and we never did find her shoes. And so the highway patrolman came, and they were trying to diagram the scene. And so he was asking us, we had to write out statements of what happened. And he asked us how bad our vehicle was damaged, and my husband told him that there was no damage to our vehicle, and the only thing we could find was there was a chip on the windshield.
He had to go look for himself and said he didn't understand because with the way the marks overlapped, we should have had an impact. And we looked at it, and he was kind of dumbfounded. He wasn't for sure how he was going to write this because it just didn't make sense from what we had told him, and then the marks that was actually left there for him to see.
And so he said, well, your vehicle should be totaled like the rest of these, because he was looking at the highway, and there was circles on the highway, black marks where both cars were spinning out of control, and you could see ours going straight up the middle. And he said, you were in this wreck. And, my husband looked at him, he said, I know. And he said, well, how am I supposed to write this up? Because he said, there's no damage to your vehicle. We just kind of laughed about it because we didn't know what to tell him. And, we didn't know how to explain it. But it was just amazing how God protected us that day.
we got back in our vehicle, driving home, and it was quiet. We really weren't talking.
I looked at Roger and I said, "Do you realize what just happened?"
And I said, yeah, but I wasn't sure you did.
And so then we just started discussing what had taken place, and we just knew that God had His hand on us that day.
With a miracle, you know, my wife or my son, either one had a seatbelt on, and it could have been a very bad situation, but I believe when she yelled Jesus, that He did it all.
When we had gotten home, our answer machine was blinking that we had messages, and I listened to them, and it was my mother calling to confirm that we had made it home. She was worried because I'm the youngest, and I still had to call home, so Mom knew that we had made it home safely. And so I had returned her call and told her that the reason we were late was because we had been in a wreck, but that we hadn't been in a wreck. And I explained to her what had happened, and she began to weep and was just praising God for taking care of us and protecting us. And then at that time, she had told me of a time when my sister, who had just moved back from Oklahoma, when she lived in Oklahoma, was stopped at a red light, and the light had turned green, and when she went to go, she saw a semi that was still going through the light, or coming through the light, and she slammed on her brakes, and when she did, the semi it went through the front of her vehicle, but she saw it go through the front of her vehicle, but it did not damage her vehicle or anything. And this was a story that I was unaware of until that time, until I told my mom what had happened to us. And so it just shows how God had His hand upon our family. Because of God's protection that day, Dalton has turned into a very wonderful young man. He is very intelligent. He has a heart for the Lord. And I am blessed each and every day that God saved us that day. And because of God's protection that day, He blessed us with another son. And all I could say was Jesus. And both cars were spinning in front of us, and the second that I said Jesus, they were behind us.
My wife just yelled Jesus, and as they were coming at us, just as soon as they were coming at us, they were behind us. They just weren't there.
And we couldn't hit the ditch, or our SUV would have turned over.
And my wife yelled Jesus.
And all I said was Jesus.